We have two, we have the three of us.
He's right on time.
Good evening, everyone. It's March 20th, 2025. This is the Committee of Precinct Chairs coming to you from Town Hall, the Great Hall Meeting Room on Court Street in Plymouth. It is a hybrid meeting. We have members within the room. We have presenters within the room, but we also have members and some members of the public online via Zoom. First, I would like to do the roll call as usual to make sure that we have a quorum. It looks like it from my eyesight, but we'll do the roll. So, Precinct 1.
Christine Pratt, Precinct 1.
Precinct 2, Matt Tavares. Precinct 3.
Dale Weber, Precinct 3, where it all began.
Precinct 4.
Precinct 4, Claire Montanari.
Precinct 5.
Precinct 5, Mike Leary.
Precinct 6.
Precinct 6, Betty Cavaco.
Precinct 7. Just walked in the room, so Jackie Perkins, thank you. Precinct 8.
Don Williams, Vice Chair of Precinct 8.
Precinct 9. Absent. Precinct 10.
Precinct 10, Alan Costello.
Precinct 11.
Precinct 11, Frank O'Brien.
Precinct 12.
Precinct 12, Pat Adelman.
Precinct 13.
Precinct 13, Jennifer Harris, sitting in for Ron Riley.
Okay. Precinct 14.
Tom Begley.
All right. Precinct 15. Absent at the moment. Precinct 16.
Precinct 16, Pompey Delafield.
Precinct 17.
Precinct 17, Joe Hutchinson.
Precinct 18.
Precinct 18, Carmen Lee Frieri, in the middle of it all.
Sure, and Precinct 15 just walked in the door, so Wrestling Brewster. The local scene has asked those within the room sitting on the committee, if you're not speaking, to make sure your microphone is off, and those on Zoom, if you could make sure that you are on mute. And then once you raise your hand, you can unmute yourself when called upon. I guess some of the audio has been picking up other sounds within the room, and it was not translating well through their television feed and the YouTube channel feed. So if you could all do that favor, that would be great. And then since we're all here and seated now, please stand with me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, thank you. If the committee would allow me for a moment, I just wanted to observe a brief moment of silence for a member of the community that was lost, that was very active on numerous boards and committees. So many, I would probably be sitting here all evening over the brief history, but for Margie Burgess, longtime school committee member, but I've also had the pleasure of serving with her on the Distinguished Visitors Committee. And I think her work within the Plymouth Public School Committee translated over to that DVC because whenever we were talking about our relationships with the sister cities, she would always bring up incorporating and making sure the children were involved first. Again, she was a longtime dedicated town meeting member. She served on so many numerous roles, but if we could all observe a moment of silence, she shall be missed. Thank you. Okay, first order of business will be for the approval of the minutes from March 10th, 2025. Do I have a motion to approve?
Motion to approve.
Motion by Mr. Brewster, seconded by Mr. Delafield. We shall do the roll. Precinct 1.
Approve.
Precinct 2, yes. Precinct 3, Pat, do you have a point of order, or I just see your hand up? You need to unmute.
I just wanted to make a comment about the minutes. We had a long discussion between members of the Committee of Precinct Chairs, and there's no mention of our comments in the minutes. And I'm just wondering if it's a policy not to print comments, or I don't understand.
Are you looking for minutes with, call it almost a transcript? Is that kind of how you're looking for it?
No, I'm just looking for comments to be highlighted, not verbatim, but particularly Dale Weber made some very good comments about one of the articles we were discussing, and he's not mentioned at all, but somebody from the public was able to give his comments. I mean, and that was reflected in the minutes. But
Okay.
None of the Committee of Precinct Chair members' comments were noted in the minutes.
Sure, with that, and I apologize, I did start taking the roll unless there was, I kind of skipped right over discussion, so I apologize, Mrs. Adelman, for not bringing you in there. If this is something that we would like to see either reflected in these past minutes from March 10th, that's something that Kristen can work on and get those within these minutes, and then also going forward. I agree it is a good idea. High level or significant comments could be reflected in the minutes for sure. And I can work with you, Kristen, on that to kind of show you what we've done in the past. So that being said, that was that piece of discussion. Any further discussion regarding the minutes? In general, Mr. Williams.
Yeah, I'm just wondering if we have the potential to use AI in these minutes. Our board of directors on the Watershed Association We record the meetings and we use AI to record a transcript. And our secretary is very happy. And I'm just wondering if that's a possibility here, because the meeting is recorded. AI is pretty new to, as far as I know, to Zoom, but it may be available here. And if it is, Kristen Ford deserves that. Absolutely. So-
Sure. I will definitely, we take this up with Kristen in between now and the next April meeting.
Yeah, I just
and how we
didn't
can
know
kind
if
of attack
anybody
this.
knew about it.
What's that?
I didn't know if anybody knew that existed.
No, I know that the YouTube also has a transcript feature as well. That might be a little coordination with the local scene, but I'll work with Kristen over between now and the next month's meeting on how we can kind of tackle it and maybe even look into that, Mr. Williams. So thank you for that suggestion. Yeah, go ahead. Ms. Perkins.
I'm just noticing that under Precinct 7, which was me, and I was here, it says vacant.
Within the minutes?
Yes.
I think within the minutes, underneath the attendance, so it's taken from the agenda, but if there's the attendance chart within the minutes, I don't actually have the minutes in front of me. I had them on my screen. Is that the minutes there? Oh, okay. But there's a chart within that shows who attended, and that helps us with the elected committee of precinct chairs show up within the top of the agenda, and then the attendance, so that we have, like, for example, Mrs. Harris sitting in, or Miss Harris sitting in, and that's kind of how we've been flowing with that. Okay. Yeah. That's okay. I'd rather questions than sitting there not having something answered and it's going to linger out there. I'm sorry, I can't hear you up here, so. Mm-hmm. Sure. I think we will do that if I can get a motion from you, Mr. Brewster.
Yes, I rescind my motion.
Okay, great. We will table these minutes until April, and then Kristen and I will work together to get a different product out there and in your hands well in advance of the April meeting. Okay? Along with these minutes. So double duty next few weeks for you, Kristen. All right. So that being said, moving on, we do have Dr. Campbell here to speak with us about Article 5 in particular and questions regarding the fiscal year 26 operational budget for the Plymouth Public Schools. Dr. Campbell, welcome. If you have anyone else that will be coming up, just have them introduce themselves before they speak for the record.
Yeah, thank you very much.
So we can get them in the minutes.
Yes, Chris Campbell, Superintendent of Schools. Very nice to be with you this evening. We have a school committee chair, Mr. Pisano, who's with me as well, and Dr. Blaisdell, our school business administrator. So thank you very much for allowing us to be here this evening. So tonight, I want to present our proposed FY26 budget, as well as Article 5, which is a feasibility and schematic design for Hedge Elementary School. So you should have received two different presentations. One is a very detailed presentation that has a narrative included with it. That is not what I'm going over this evening. That's more sort of for additional information, but happy to answer any questions related to that if you had a chance to look at that. But we'll be going over the abbreviated slide deck this evening. So the following, I always like to start with sort of a simple demographic of our school district. We continue to operate 13 schools in an alternative high school program which supports students from North and South high schools. Our demographic continues to change, becoming slightly more diverse than it was even last year. Additionally, our high school population, which includes students that are multilingual learners, economically disadvantaged students, and students with special needs, continues to increase. As of July 24th, we were at 7,116. As of today, we're at 7,129. And we have approximately 100 students that are considered homeless throughout the year. This is very difficult to see necessarily from a distance, but this slide shows our change in enrollment by grade between FY19, so pre-COVID, to FY24, and also included Massachusetts data for comparative purposes, which you can see on the table on the right. So overall, since COVID, we're down 4.6% cumulatively, 339 students from FY19 to FY24. That's across all 13 schools. Again, I mentioned today we're at 7133 as of today. I made a note of that, actually. So it's a 1% increase over last year. As you can see, our greatest decline in enrollment is noted last year was grade 6, 7, and 8 in terms of that middle school group over the last 5 years. That's a 5-year change. One trend to note is the change in enrollment in preschool. While Massachusetts has seen a 6% increase, we've seen a 41% increase. Now, I want to be very specific with my remarks here. That does not mean that we have 41% more 3-year-olds in our preschool. We've seen a 41% increase to students that are 3 years old who have been identified as requiring special education. So this is, in my opinion, this is a result of a whole host of things. Primarily COVID, I think, has really taken a toll, but we're seeing students with significantly more medical, neurological, and developmental challenges, which has really been a challenge for our preschool population. So considerable increase there. I always try to show, excuse me, I'm losing my voice, of course, as I present. Excuse me. This table shows our current average class sizes by school. So a detailed overview to show all 8 elementary schools, as well as our sort of average by grade level and what we consider a soft cap. So when we're doing planning purposes for classroom design, how many class sections we're going to run, we typically try to go no more than 22 kindergarten, first grade, second grade in those early years, and then no more than 25 in grades 3, 4, and 5. As you can see, in our larger schools, for example, Indian Brook, South Elementary, we're closer to those soft targets. Sometimes we're a little bit over. Where it becomes very challenging to be, you're either going to have smaller classes or larger classes, is in the smaller schools, such as Cold Spring and Hedges. So I highlighted a few of those for you there. So we would not endorse 32 students in a kindergarten classroom, so we're running 2 sections there. So by having fewer sections to spread the students out, you typically are going to have smaller class sizes when you don't have the opportunity to collapse them anymore. So I just wanted to explain. We use that in terms of, and this is something that changes from year to year depending on the population. So with the enrollment, again, we're relatively flat, a little bit up from last year, but one thing that has certainly increased is the percentage of high needs student population. High needs is defined by 3 things: your economically disadvantaged students, your students with special education needs, as well as your, what am I blanking on? Your English language learners, excuse me. My glasses. I'm like, where are my glasses? I can't see a thing. So as you can see here, we have seen an 87% increase in economically disadvantaged families, a 663% increase in multilingual learners. In the last 5 years alone, we've seen a 373% increase in our multilingual learners. So we've gone from, 2.8% to almost 6% of the student body population. Our students identified as special education has also risen in recent years, predominantly at the preschool, but across other schools as well. So when we go about building the budget for every year, this has been a practice. This is my 17th year in Plymouth. I've been involved in the budget process all 17 years, but 5 as superintendent. And we always work very collaboratively with the town. We meet with the town manager, we meet with the finance director, school business administrator, and we look at the available revenues. And we did that this year as well. The typical sort of distribution or allocation split between the town and the school has been approximately 39 to 61%. So we did the same thing this year, assuming no increase to state aid, and that was pretty consistent with last year. There wasn't a big increase at all. Our available revenue to build our budget this year, in terms of our guide, was just over $5.8 million. So we went into the exercise with that. And we then ask our cost center managers, our principals, our coordinators, our academic directors, anyone who has a budget, to build their budget, as a needs-based approach. So our budget, proposed budget is $127,229,274. The overwhelming majority of our budget is comprised of salaries. These are teachers, assistants, specialists, our clerical staff, our custodians, the people that are operating the schools. With our non-salary budget is 23% of our total budget. When you break that down even further, the blue portion of this chart is showing that the large percentage of that is certificated salaries. This is anyone with a license, a teacher, a specialist, administrator, anyone who's working with students, instructionally with a license. We have approximately $3.6 million in clerical salaries. Other salaries would be 15.7. Contracted services comprise $25.8 million. And we're under $3 million for total supplies and materials in this proposed budget, which is less than it's been in prior years. We've really made a lot of reductions in that area, trying to keep and maintain our staffing levels where we want them. So that number is slightly down. We've sort of chipped away at that as much as we possibly can in recent years. So I want to bring your attention to this table. So, we code all of our expenditures in these six object codes: certificated salaries, clerical salaries, and other salaries. And then the non-salary expenses are contracted services, supplies and materials, and other expenses, which was on the pie chart that I showed you before. So our total proposed budget is up 4.8%. But when you look at where that is, the overwhelming majority of that is in salaries. As you know, we had successful negotiations. I was here last year talking about how challenging it was in terms of recruitment and retention, and we needed to do something to try to be more competitive with our teacher salaries, particularly in the region. So we were able to successfully negotiate our contracts. So the majority of our increases are going towards those contracts. When you look at all of our non-salary dollars in our budget, that 23% that I mentioned, that entire section is going up less than 1%. Keep in mind, those services, contracted services, supplies and materials, are not going up, in terms of, they're not going up 1% themselves. Our contracts are quite expensive. The bus contracts are going up more than that. Tuitions are going up more than that for programs. What we did to get to that number is we reduced a lot of contracts and services in order to get to that number. We do feel comfortable with where we are with that, though. But yes, sir.
I was wondering, last year you came in and said that the teacher salaries weren't as competitive and you were worried about that.
Yes.
This year you say that they're competitive. Do you have any indicators that show that teachers are staying, they're happier, or working more joyfully, let's say?
Yeah, I think the teachers feel appreciated for our efforts to work collaboratively with them. We're not losing people to other districts this year. We did lose a few last year, people who had been with us for quite some time, to be quite honest, 11 years in some cases. We have not, knock on wood, experienced that this year, which is a good thing, which we're happy about. We're now, we feel we did our due diligence. It was a challenge for us. I don't know if I have it in these slides for this evening, but what we did to get there is we made some reductions last spring. So we did a reduction in force. We actually eliminated 29 positions, and we chose to do it in the spring for a particular reason. We did it because we know every spring that's the time that we typically have openings that will come up. People are retiring, they're relocating, positions become open, and it gives our current employees that would have been on the chopping block an opportunity for another position within the district. So we were able to have 27 of those 29 get comparable positions within the district, but that freed up money to do the contract negotiations in a fair way. But yes, they are happy. Thank you for that. So another question that we always get has to do with our per pupil expenditure. Our per pupil expenditure is higher than the state average. So per pupil expenditure is determined by looking at our total budget in relation to all the categories up here. And this is sort of apples to apples across the state. So looking at administrative expenses, instructional leadership expenses, for our academic coordinators, teaching expenses, other teaching services that are provided, support services, professional development, et cetera, et cetera. We are above, and again, this is FY23. People ask me, why do you have FY23 not current? Because the state, at the end of the year, they're doing the end of year report. So last year's numbers are the most current is 23. 24 will probably be coming up, forthcoming. But as you can see, Plymouth is above, when looking at FY23 expenditures, is slightly above the state average. What skews that number are those two categories which I've highlighted: pupil services and insurance retirement programs. We have the same insurance as everyone in the town. We're self-insured. That cost is much more expensive here than the state average, right? There's only so much we can do to control that on our end, but we do everything we can in that regard. And we don't have a lot of teachers that are taking insurance now because they can stay on their family's insurance many times until they're 26. Pupil services is comprised of special education, mental health support, and transportation. I want to point out it's the transportation that is driving that cost up $500 above state average. If you were to level fund those in comparison to the state, we'd actually be below in other categories. When you look at those categories, we're right at or slightly below in most cases in terms of what we're spending. So we're doing everything we can to be mindful of where we're spending so as not to, to be responsible stewards of our funds. Excuse me, so when you look at the proposed budget that we've presented this evening, there are 5 major drivers or increases found in our budget. Contracts that were successfully negotiated, special education services, transportation and tuitions, declining state and federal grants, utilities, and transportation. Our contracts, again, they went up about 6% overall when you look at both cost of living and adjustments for educational attainment, which happens in the teacher's contract, so that went up over 6%. Special education services are quite expensive. We'll talk about things that we do to try to curb those costs. Transportation is quite expensive, and I'll talk in a moment about the things that we're doing there to try to curb those costs as much as we possibly can. We've seen a decline in state aid, federal aid really, and state aid, but I'll talk about that in a moment. Our utilities, we're seeing an increase in usage, and those costs have gone up several $100,000. We're looking at additional ways to kind of curb those costs as well, and transportation overall, and I'll talk about that in greater detail in a moment as well. So when it comes to state, and I know you can't see that from here, but it's really not as important that you see it, but looking at that rightmost bar graph, series of bar graphs, you can see that they're actually down. Those are the total grants. We receive about $3.5 to $3.6 million in federal grants. These are the title grants, Title I, II, III, in addition to IDEA, which is special education. Those are down. These grants go towards supporting our most vulnerable learners, our economically disadvantaged, supplemental services, and special education services. Yes, sir.
Yeah, do you think that this is a trend? Are you starting to be suspicious?
Well, these are from, it's been a trend for a few years. We've seen with this money not being, keeping up with inflation, which is concerning. I will tell you that there's been concern regarding the future of federal funds to education. We all know that there has been a directive to eliminate the Department of Education at the federal level. Actually, the Boston office has been closed. Chicago, New York, I think Philadelphia. About a week or so ago, I got a hold of the org chart for the U.S. Department of Education and some of the sort of departments and functions that they were looking to dissolve. When I looked at that, I was cautiously optimistic that these programs weren't being affected. And I say cautiously because I don't want to say that it won't happen. As of last night, the information I received was that title grants and IDEA would maintain, would be funded and provided to the state. How that is allocated, I don't know. But it is a concern of ours. I think it's certainly a concern of ours, not knowing sort of how this will impact us here in
I mean,
Massachusetts.
I can understand why the federal is going down, but I don't understand why the Commonwealth of Massachusetts is not keeping up with reality on this.
Yeah, we
I
are.
think we need a lobbyist there for several reasons. But thank you.
You're welcome. So in terms of the state aid, so Massachusetts state aid, Chapter 70, so it hasn't kept up with inflation historically, right? It's been, that has been a challenge. I will say that last year we did receive a supplemental appropriation, which town meeting members approved and supported. We were very grateful of that at fall town meeting. That helped us to cover our personnel expenses. The governor's proposed budget for FY26 has an increase of approximately $550,000 to Chapter 70 for next year. So if that went through, that would be very helpful in terms of addressing our needs. So we'll see what comes of that. We're cautiously optimistic. So I talked about a lot of drivers to expenses. I want to talk about some of the methods that we're doing to lower our expenses. First of all, special education. I want to stress that special education is not the reason that our budget is as high as it is. I think it's very important to say that. I don't want anyone to think that our special ed programs are sort of outpacing any other costs in our budget. The percentage of money that we spend on special education in relation to our total budget is comparable to the state, what the state does across the state. So it's in line to state average. One way that we try to reduce our expenses is by investing in our programs in district, because where the costs are is when we have to send students to programs that are state approved outside of the district, very costly. You're looking at least $65,000 for a collaborative placement. Some of the programs are well over $100,000, in addition to the transportation. So when you do that, you're talking about millions of dollars. So many, many years ago, again, I've been here 17 years, about 10, 11 years ago, we made a deliberate investment in our special education program. So if you go to the majority of our elementary schools, if you go to both middle schools and to both high schools, you're going to see classrooms that have been equipped and designed to provide supports to some of our most needy students with complex neurological needs, cognitive needs, autism, et cetera, et cetera. And that continuum goes from preschool all the way through high school, which is wonderful for two reasons. One, it's keeping kids in our district. It's keeping families in their communities. It's also keeping the costs down. Because if we didn't have those 281 students in our schools, we would be obligated, if we didn't have those programs, we would be obligated to send those students to programs outside the district. And that would cost a heck of a lot more money than it does to keep our programs in. So we're really happy about that. And the only reason we can do that is because our enrollment has gone down over the last 10, 15 years. So it allows us, so when you go in, so my point is, if you were to go in our schools, even though our enrollment has gone down over the years, you're not going to see empty classrooms. You're going to see classrooms that once maybe had 25 kids and general education students in them that have programs for our students. Okay. Another thing that we try to do is our approach to solar and utilities. Utilities is very expensive. Anything we can do to reduce our expenses in utilities, we're going to do. And about 10 years ago, actually it is 10 years ago, we entered a 20-year solar lease agreement, which locked our rates in for electricity at 8 cents per kilowatt hour, which has reduced our overall expenses in that area over $7 million. We've also been working with Mike Cahill's office in sustainability and resiliency, hopefully to install solar carports at South High School, South Middle School, and North, similar to the other agreement that we have, which has helped to reduce this cost. This proposed solar initiative structure it's like a power purchase agreement where it would be third-party owned, but at a fixed rate for 20 years, again, bringing those costs down. So we're trying to do everything we can, where we can. Mentioned transportation, and I've said this for the last few years, transportation is very, very expensive. One of the largest drivers of our operational budget. So while our district cost per bus actually is lower than most communities around us. And Dr. Blaisdell meets with all the school business administrators who are getting quotes for new contracts, and what they're paying for each bus per day is much more costly than us. The problem is we have a lot more buses than most people. We're running a lot of buses because we're 104 square miles. I always say we're a suburban community with an urban fringe and rural conditions on the road. So it's very challenging to provide transportation. We don't have a great infrastructure set up. We have a lot of private roads we can't go down, dirt roads, and we have to run a lot of buses. Our buses travel over 4,700 miles per day, over 851,000 per year. It's a lot of miles on our buses. So we're running 71 buses a day, 2 for Harbor Academy, which is our alternative program, 3 for MAP Academy, which is a charter school here in town, so we're running the Plymouth students there. Those buses we actually own, as well as the Harbor Academy buses. We purchased those through ESSER funds years ago when we had the federal funds as an investment to bring those costs down. So when we did that, we actually reduced our transportation costs by about $175,000 to $200,000 a year by doing that in-house. We have a bus that we also run to Bristol Agricultural School. Many people don't know that we're responsible for the tuition and transportation of students that go to that program. So if you're not, we don't run an agricultural program, so families have the option of having their students apply for that. And if they get into it, we're responsible for them, both fiscally and transportation-wise. And then we have 65 first student buses, 9 of those those buses are also different for Rising Tide Charter School, which we're also operating. So in all, we have 5,597 students that are scheduled for our buses every day. So some of the things that we're doing, again, to curb those costs, as I mentioned, acquiring additional buses and vans so that we can not only do those runs that I mentioned, but we also can do our own field trips, we can do our athletic routes, and we're not contracting for that. So we're saving money by doing that. Much more efficient, much less costly. We did a third-party efficient study, which actually reduced a couple of routes for this year. To go any further would be very, very challenging. Our buses, our elementary buses have approximately 45 to 55 students, some of them near 60. The high school buses don't have as many students, but they're going a great distance, averaging 43 to 47 minutes apiece. So to collapse those anymore would be, we couldn't do. And a lot of times you'll see the secondary buses won't have a lot of kids on them because they may be doing sports after school, but they have a seat on that bus because they've paid for that bus. So it's going to vary what you see. We've also looked at collaborative purchasing, so purchasing routes to private schools. So we've got other districts that are going. We can, purchase the route collectively. We've also been doing, we're getting some good progress in this area too, working with our legislators on some potential bills. So last year we worked on some resolutions with the school committee. We now have a former school committee chair who's now state representative who's brought a bill forward, which is started off as one of these resolutions. It's the bottom one, the transportation reform to prevent price gouging of school districts. We pay an extraordinary rate, not for our yellow buses. It's when we have to contract for these unanticipated, unscheduled transportation events. And what I mean by that is homeless students, sometimes new move-ins that require special education transportation, as well as foster. And we're responsible for that transportation. A lot of those aren't predictable, so you're not going to know I have 100 students that are going to be homeless, and these are the days that we're going to need to transport them. That varies from year to year, from week to week. And we're contracting with agencies for that many times outside of the contracts we already have. And those rates can vary significantly from $250 to $800 a day. And that is what that bill is trying to curb. We also have another one that would potentially, if there was grant funds there from the state, to look at a reimbursement method for districts with extraordinary expenses, sort of modeled after a special ed formula. And we hope that that would be considered someday as well. Another thing that we do, I mentioned the agricultural expenses, that's about $28,000 per student. So by investing in our vocational programs, but we are very blessed, this community is very blessed to have amazing comprehensive career and technical education programs, both at South High School and at North. If we didn't have those programs, we would be losing a lot of students to vocational schools elsewhere, in addition to the Bristol Aggie. So that number would just exponentially get greater in terms of the loss of, that revenue for us. Which would really be a detriment to us. So another thing that we do is we're always trying to seek competitive grants. So this year we were very fortunate to receive 5 significant grants. I'm not going to read through all of these. They have to do with energy, our vocational program, our TV program. But the one that I do want to focus on is the last one there, which was about $500,000. It's the second year that we received that. It's a Commonwealth Preschool Partnership Grant, a wonderful grant. I had an opportunity to speak to the Commissioner of Early Education last week, as well as the Secretary of Education who was visiting us actually last week, about this grant, because this is really has saved us. I mentioned the preschool numbers going up by 41%. Our preschool program used to be Mount Pleasant, right, in North Plymouth. It was moved to PCIS. When the numbers went down at the middle school. So they were in one house at PCIS. We've outgrown that space. So consequently, we have 2 classes that run at Manomet Elementary. So Manomet is now a pre-K to 5 school, and it's gone very, very well. If we didn't have this grant right now, we would be in need of 3 additional classrooms with specialists because of the students that are being identified for services. What this grant allows us to do is to take itinerant staff and specialists and go into private preschools in the Plymouth area. So if a student's identified through early intervention, requires special education support, we're going into those programs, providing the services there. It's eliminating the need to have those classrooms, which I mentioned, but it's also allowing families to keep their children in a full-day program, which is good for them, because when they come to us, when students are identified and they're in a preschool program, it's a very difficult thing for them to decide. Am I going to receive the services for my child in a 2 to 3 day a week program, or am I going to keep my kids in a 5-day week program because they're working, right? So this allows them to stay in their private preschool program, but it also reduces our costs and expenses significantly. So we're very happy about that, and I feel very, it's a competitive grant next year, but I feel very confident that we'll receive it, and hopefully it continues to get expanded, because there is a big push at the state to try to provide universal preschool. So this is sort of the last, getting to the end of the budget slides, and then I'll talk about Article 5 after any questions you have. But sort of just future priorities and concerns. Our future transportation expenses, as our contract extensions expire, we are actually doing a study with the Massachusetts Association of Pupil Transportation to look at what it would take to take on more of our transportation, evaluate the efficiency of our model right now. So we look forward to the information we get there. But we are concerned about how expensive those contracts could get if we don't come up with a solution. Our increased need for resources for supporting English language learners, our economically disadvantaged students and students with disabilities, if that rises. Our preschool, which I mentioned, that grant is significant. If we don't have that, it's a big concern. Facility improvements. And I'll talk about one of the things that we're doing with Article 5. We hope we get everyone's support on that. But we have aging facilities, particularly at the elementary level, a lot of old buildings that have a lot of capital needs. And we're trying to find ways to, spread our sort of capital expenditures across our schools to get the most out of our dollars, but we're concerned about that. Energy, as I mentioned before, as utilities costs go up. Technology. We've been one-to-one since COVID, so with that comes a need for replenishment. We're okay right now, but that is a future concern. And then lastly, the uncertainty of federal funding. We're not sure where that will go, but hopefully it continues to be there. So I'm happy to take any questions about the budget right now.
Sure. Thank you, Dr. Campbell,
Yeah.
for that presentation. And I know most of us kind of started receiving our books over the weekend and have the other
Okay, great.
materials. So
Beautiful.
that being said, I know I have some people online from the Committee of Precinct Chairs. Kristen, if I could just let you know that Catherine Holmes has joined online. She joined a little bit earlier. I just didn't get a second to let you know, so she's remote. So that being said, I'm going to take Catherine online and then Mr. Brewster here in the room. So Ms. Holmes.
Great, thank you. Hi, Mr. Campbell. I've been double booked in a conference, so I'm not in a place where I can get online and show my face, but
No
I'm
worries.
so happy to hear that you're here. I just have a couple of quick comments and questions. So you mentioned the reduction in the enrollment for the 6th to 8th grade students. And I was just curious, have you done any type of analysis to determine what's causing that decline in enrollment for that specific group? Because I would suspect that if they were leaving to go to Rising Tide, those numbers would still be included in our numbers, right?
Correct. No, we're not seeing an increase to students going to Rising Tide. They're just not in that cohort at that grade level. It's just a decline in that particular cohort in Plymouth. We're not seeing.
Right, so have we done any surveys to those parents of those students that are leaving our district to determine where are they going to? Because I would think it would be good information to have as to what those parents feel that we're not being able to provide to them, because we have such incredible middle school and high schools here with so many different types of services. I'm just curious as to where are they going? Is there any trending?
Yeah, well, they're not going to they're not, again, this is all anecdotal, but we're not seeing students that are leaving our middle schools and going elsewhere. We're just seeing a decline in that age level of students in our district. So I don't know if it's people moving out. Okay. They're just not here. They're certainly not, we're not seeing an increase in private. We're not seeing an increase to parochial or to charter. It's just that particular sort of age group is just declined over, again, 5-year period.
Okay, so we would see that most likely. It's that whole group that kind of goes and follows the pattern, right? The 4th, the 5th, the 6th.
Yeah, that
And then when it
cohort.
gets to, right, so the numbers are lower, is that correct?
Correct.
Mr. Tavares, I have a couple of additional questions, if I could.
Sure, I'll allow you a couple of follow-up, and then we'll get to Mr. Brewster.
Sure. So I'm glad to see that you're looking into, the transportation costs. And, we have an awful lot of kids, and we know that it's a pretty huge district. In what you're talking about for the analysis that you're doing, so is there going to be like a cost-benefit analysis of what it would look like if we were to take back all or a lot more of our transportation that could potentially be shared in the future?
Yeah, so we would be looking at, we're going to do an analysis of all part and a variety of scenarios to really look at what it would truly take to sort of take ownership of that. So that will be part of that report eventually.
That would be great. When do you think we might be able to see that, if you could come back before us at the COPC? How long do you think it'll take to get that type of
I just
detail?
looked over to Dr. Blaisdell, who's been working with MAPT. We're hoping to get it by the end of the school year, the end of June.
Oh, okay, great. And then one last question for you. You and I have talked about this a lot over the years, and it's something that's really been a very sensitive and hot topic for me. And I didn't see it in the presentation, but I was double booked tonight, so I was a little late joining. So forgive me if I'm being redundant here, but we've talked a lot about our buildings and our buildings, the state of our elementary schools specifically. And we know that from the report that you gave us a couple of years ago, that it looked like we had on the docket, based on the way that buildings expire or need maintenance, it looked, if I remember correctly, there was a potentially 8+ schools that were going to need either significant remodeling that you'd need to evaluate whether or not, if I remember correctly, whether we would have to do an assessment whether it would be worth it to do the remodeling versus rebuilding the school. But there was probably 5 or 6 of them that we thought would probably need to be looked at to rebuild. Am I right in from the presentation you did, I think, 2 years ago?
You are very correct, and I'm going to, when I get into the Article 5 portion of the presentation, I will get into that in great detail, but yes, we did do an analysis, and our elementary schools in particular are very old and in need of repair.
Okay, good. So you're going to pick it up. I'm going to stop there and wait to hear what you have to say. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Tavares.
Mr. Brewster.
Thank you. Last night, Precinct 15 had an awesome caucus. Dr. Blaisdell came in, and we had members of FinCom who were on the school subcommittee. So it was really great to really dig down in these numbers. A couple numbers that came out from this, your total budget with all the grants and everything is around 191 million?
So again, I know this
No?
keeps coming up. Yeah, I
That's what we talked about
can't
last
speak
night.
for, I can only speak for the budget
Yep.
that we operate,
Right. Okay,
which is not that.
okay.
Yeah.
All right. And it was looked at like 11 million in transportation, that's where we are?
About 10.6, I believe.
Yeah, okay.
Yep.
7
Total,
million-
that's not just buses, that's special
Yeah.
education,
Yeah.
all of it, yeah.
Yep. 7 million in capital, right, around there?
You propose capital in terms of capital projects, is that what you're saying?
I'm just going over the whole shebang, and
Okay.
it was interesting last night because we were talking about, total numbers and, what we're investing, and you mentioned that you're able to be a little more competitive with getting teachers, and we also talked about where we are as kids graduating through the system. We talked about going to college, that there was a percentage that going to college. I just wanted to talk about total numbers and where you are competitively with salaries and where you see the outcome of this investment and where you see the children graduating out of the Plymouth school systems. And I need to show my constituents, we're investing in this and we're having a great outcome. And I know you can't.
No, I'm just curious, what's the question, I guess?
What the question is, where do you see the investment that we're making in the schools? And where do you see that outcome? Are you seeing the percentage of kids leaving Plymouth, going into college, going forward?
This is what I'll say to that. I feel that the budget that we have is fair and very much appreciated and fair in order to do the work that we need to do, that we've reduced in a lot of areas in order to maintain the staffing, because we're prioritizing that in this budget. And I wouldn't want to lock in on one particular measure, but I would say that we should be proud of the education that our kids are receiving, the opportunities that exist for our kids, and the support they're getting in order to help them figure out, what they want to do when they leave us.
Thank you. And I wasn't trying to pigeonhole you.
I just didn't know what the question was.
I need to go out and say, the reason that 63% of our
Yeah.
budget is the schools is because of these outcomes and where we're going.
61.
I just want to
63.
add in there, I think, echoing Dr. Campbell here, I think with the way education is today and with the way the world is today, it used to be the common practice, probably when we were a lot younger, to say, okay, what's the percentage going to college? That was just the general feeling. But now we have a much-needed workforce within the trades. The schools are doing amazing work at Plymouth South and at Plymouth North within the trades. So really your measure or metric of success, it's like Dr. Campbell said, well, is it adding to the workforce? But I mean, you could, some people may say, well, what's just the graduation rate from each of the high schools? Is that a measure of success? It's a moving target.
And we're looking at all of it, and we look at all of them. We're held highly accountable by the state. Yeah. No, I would say to your point, no, to Ms. Brewster, that, no, I think we have a school district that I am certainly proud of. I feel that, do we get everything, is everything perfect? No. It's very, very complex. Education is just getting more and more complex. But I think we have a district that this community should be proud of, which I think is an investment in this community in general, beyond just, yes, 61% of the budget is school-related buildings, which also, there are other departments that have buildings that aren't in their sort of proposed budgets, but it's a part of this community. And if we don't invest that $7 million in capital, we're going to be investing a lot more because the buildings will fall apart. And then, we had to do an emergency procurement a few years ago. I don't know if people remember it, Nathaniel Morton. The roof was falling down. 100-plus-year-old building. So it's a real, these are real needs, and we're trying to prioritize in that capital the envelope of our buildings, safety and security, and just be very mindful of the taxpayer dollar along the way. I've lived here too. I understand, 25 years as a resident. My 3 children have gone through this school system. They're all gone now, but yeah, and we're trying, we understand education is expensive. Education-related
expenses.
expenses.
I appreciate it,
Yeah.
and thank you, Mr.
No, I
Brazil,
appreciate
for
you,
last
too.
night, but thank you for that answer.
Yeah, of course.
Thank you.
Mr. Williams.
First of all, for full disclosure, I am a real fan of education, even though it may get me deported tomorrow. But I'm impressed. I looked through your material, and your flexibility and your planning and your cost cutting were most impressive. It was really good to see that happening at such a scale with such a high stake in there. I was also impressed with your $2 million request for the examination of the two elementary
Article
schools. I
5.
was surprised. I didn't hear anything there.
That's next.
That's the next. Okay. Well, my final question is, your class size is really low. I mean, it's really, really good, and you've kept it that way.
Yeah, we're prioritizing.
Do you have any metrics that are justifying you doing that? And I'm assuming the answer is yes, or I wouldn't have asked the question, but I'm wondering what they are. You're following it, obviously.
Yeah, I mean, I think in terms of the research we've done, in terms of like that tipping point, it's not just class size, it's also the acuity of the needs in the classroom. So because we're seeing, you could have a class of 20, which is a good number, right? It's a good number. But you could have, I'll give you an example, at Hedge Elementary School, 8 of those students may be non-English speakers in that class of 20. And then you have other students that are receiving special education support. So that 20 isn't 20 learners that are learning the same way. There's a lot of differentiation that's going in that classroom. So our research will show that those numbers are critical, particularly when you have a diverse population that has such differentiated needs. Most of our languages we have, Brazilian Portuguese is 81% of our student body that are multilingual learners. We have about 8 to 9% Spanish, but we have 13 other languages in the schools, which people don't realize. A lot of singletons, a couple, here and there, but that's how education has changed, and the mental health issues as well are real. I mean, some really significant issues. So we try to, the more personalized we can make education in the classroom, particularly at the elementary level, that early intervention, the better off we are. We're trying to nurture those kids. There's a lot of things going on in these kids' lives, and we feel good about those numbers. We realize that there are some communities that have 29, 30 in those grades that are trying to get overrides right now, right down the street, to get an operational budget. So we feel very fortunate that we're in a place where we're not doing that and that we're still able to maintain that. But we cut everywhere else in order to maintain those numbers. If we felt that those numbers could go higher, we'd be, we would do that, but yeah.
There is one more benefit that wasn't mentioned by having an excellent school system like we have, and that is that you bring in some of the better businesses. They're looking for higher education, they're looking for good roads, they're looking for good government. So I thank you for that.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate your support.
Any further questions on the budget? Yeah, go ahead, Mr. Costello.
I'd like to ask one question, based on today, you touched on it, the federal government and the move that they initiated. There was a matrix that I think we could use, maybe you could answer it, but in 4th and 8th grade, the percentage of math and reading scores, and it was abysmal, really, 67, 69%. Where is Plymouth? Do you have those numbers in your?
I don't have it off the top of my head, but I
Where
can
would Plymouth
forward
be,
you.
would
I
you
can
guess?
forward you an article that was just put in Axios Boston recently.
I'm sorry, say that again?
I can forward you an article that I just received a couple of days ago regarding Plymouth. It talks about the student achievement pre-COVID, post-COVID, and we still have this decline. And it mentioned that most communities are not seeing that change since COVID, with the exception of several affluent communities, and Plymouth was mentioned in that. So we're seeing good progress in our students. Our students are doing better.
Is that something you tracked prior to COVID? I mean, do you know what the COVID number was?
We're constantly tracking that. We're held accountable to the state. State puts us on what's called a district report card every year. Okay, so at the district level and at each individual school, we are held accountable for academic achievement and growth in ELA and math at every grade level. We're held accountable. That's through MCAS. We're also held accountable to graduation rates. We're held to dropout rates, to chronic absenteeism, all those things. So we're tracking all of that considerably. Yeah.
This is just one simple matrix, the fourth grade and 8th grade. Can you provide that?
Not off the top of my head, but I could provide that to you.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. But I just point out that Plymouth was actually highlighted as a district that is making.
No, that's encouraging. That's very good.
Yeah.
I just don't know if we're right on the number. Hopefully, we're above that number.
We're above the number.
Okay, very good.
You're
I'd
above
like to
the
see it
number.
when I have an opportunity. Thank you.
Absolutely, I'll send that to you.
Any further questions within the room or online? If not, if you're ready to move on to Article 5,
Absolutely.
Dr. Campbell?
Thank you very much. So I want to explain an exciting opportunity for our community. I think that will support our students and really actually protect our taxpayers and ensure that we're investing money in the future. And it's Article 5, which is a feasibility and schematic design for Hedge Elementary School. Actually, we'll be looking at a study for both Hedge and Cold Spring. Hedge is the school that has been identified by the Mass School Building Authority, or MSBA. But it's looking at a potential consolidation of 2 schools for a new renovated state-of-the-art facility. But this is the phase 1 of that. We were actually, we applied to what's called a statement of interest the last 2 years. The first year we were not accepted into the queue, not because of the application. There was just so many communities that were trying to seek this grant opportunity as well. We were accepted this year. And I'll talk a little bit about that now. So again, our district's been accepted into the MSBA's eligibility period, which gives us a chance to explore consolidation of Hedge and Cold Spring schools. That says Article 19. It was originally in the box. It's Article 5. My apologies. It was originally going to be Article 19. So it's to seek $2 million to cover the essential project costs, and it's a critical step for any future MSBA funding for project development. Again, the MSBA eligibility period is a 270-day time frame in which the district must complete several critical steps along the way, and we're ready to move in that, and we're in that process right now. But this would help us to potentially invite us into a future building project. So the MSBA eligibility period, again, is a 270-day timeframe, which the district must complete several critical steps, and those 8 steps are right here. So it's the initial compliance certification, which will be sent to them actually this week. The formation of a school building committee, so we have an existing building committee, but for various projects like South High School and North High School, MSBA wants to see a school building committee. So it's the building committee with additional people that represent the schools and the school's interests, and eventually would be an ONIF project manager as a part of that. An educational profile questionnaire detailing current and future educational programs. So we're doing this for all of our buildings, submitting that to the MSBA. They will also look at enrollment projections, so they'll be analyzing enrollment projections. The MSBA does this, looking at new growth and whatnot, reviewing that with them. Submission of our maintenance practices and capital planning. They want to see when MSBA invests in a community, they want to see that the community is invested in their buildings. So they look for the capital plans and that helps us in terms of credits as well. And then the funding, which is Article 5, the local vote authorization scheduled for town meeting, the funding of a feasibility study, and then the legal agreement for that funding and reimbursement, which we were told would be just over 53% of that total cost for this, which is actually higher than it's been in past projects. So, and this was mentioned earlier with a question earlier. So our exploration for this opportunity really began with 2 studies. So my first year as superintendent, we went through a facilities needs assessment. This was conducted in July of 21 to examine all of our buildings. We hadn't done it in many, many years. To examine all of our buildings and identify the immediate, near-term, long-term repairs of our buildings. We also did in 2023 an existing conditions study. So we brought in AI3 architects, and they did what's called an existing conditions study. They looked at all of our elementary schools in comparison to the school building authority's standards of operation in terms of educational spaces, programming, whatnot. So we have 2 great reports. We took those 2 reports, and these studies revealed significant challenges at Hedge and Cold, at a number of buildings, really, as was mentioned by Ms. Holmes. We have aging facilities, but significant challenges at Hedge and Cold Spring School. Hedge is 114 years old, as many of you know, and Cold Spring is 74 years old. Both schools, according to MSBA standards, are undersized by 40% state standards. So neither building has fire suppression systems, and both face ADA compliance issues, HVAC deficiencies, and potential deterioration if not looked at. Also keep in mind, as we do capital projects on our buildings, ADA compliance becomes an issue. So if you're investing so much in a 3-year period to your building, you need to bring that building up to full ADA. So it's additional cost. So we could put millions and millions of dollars at these old buildings. We're going to have the same building. The floor plan is going to be the same. We're still going to have the same challenges. The building would be in better shape, but we're going to have the same challenges that we currently have. And the challenges are there are many. We have space issues. If you were to go to Hedge or Cold Spring, you're going to see makeshift spaces where spaces have been created for teachers. Like we've had our carpenter come in and actually make spaces for conference rooms in the middle of a hallway. We've made a room for our ESL teachers, which is very, very small to bring students in. But we have teachers that have workspaces on stairwells. We have the Hedge Gymnasium is also used for music classes. And by the way, that's the only way to get to the other side of the building, is to cut through the gym. So you're cutting through everyone's class all the time as well. Our buildings are old. They require extensive maintenance, very well maintained. I say this all the time. They're very well maintained, but they require a lot of care. They're old buildings. So Article 5 is crucial to that process. It would seek funding to cover the $2 million costs of the feasibility study and schematic design phases. That would include the owner's project manager, a designer, environmental and site testing, and any contingency-related expenses. That would enable us to explore the best options for potentially consolidating Hedge and Cold Spring to determine whether a new building or renovation expansion moving forward. So I'm very excited about this opportunity and hope it is supported as well. Happy to answer any questions I can.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Campbell. Sorry, I was taking a note on that last slide. I have a few comments online and not seeing any in the room right at the moment. I'm going to go with Mrs. Adelman and then Catherine Holmes, please.
Thank you. Dr. Campbell, at my Precinct 12 caucus meeting, the assistant superintendent
Yes, Mr.
came,
Shofi.
and he explained to us that Hedge and Cold Spring, we're getting this study for 2 schools for the price of 1. So I just wanted to make note of that. And I want to commend the staff at Hedge and Cold Spring to be working so well under the conditions they have to work under. Thank you.
No, thank you. Yes, it's a great opportunity to have 2 buildings looked at the same time. It's an opportunity to address 2 schools at the same time, so very good point. And we have amazing staff, they're just an amazing, like all of our staff, they work in our buildings, from the front desk to the classroom teachers, the custodians, the cafeteria workers, they're great. And I think they're so used to working in these conditions, they don't realize it until they actually go to someone else's school. But it's quite challenging. I would welcome anyone, and I've brought in other people before, but it's just not equitable. It's not an equitable experience, and I've said that to, you may recall a few years ago, we were looking at like redistricting, and I had some conversations with families, and it's not an equitable environment, and we're hoping to address that through this.
Thank you. Miss Holmes, excuse me.
Yes, okay, thank you, Mr. Campbell. I'm really glad that you were able to touch on this. So a couple of quick questions, because this is a hot button for me. So the last time we had talked about Hedges specifically, and I'm not sure so much about Cold Springs, but one of the greatest issues that we had there was that the buildings were so old that we were still working under environments where they had like horsehair plaster. And one of the complaints of the staff and the students was that it was so hot and there was an air conditioning issue. And I know we tried to make measures to try to make the buildings cooler in the summer months. Yeah. Can you speak to what we're going to do in the meantime between now and then? Have any of those issues been addressed? And I can't remember, was this a building that also had some asbestos problems?
We've done the remediation of the asbestos.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yeah, there's still some that's contained, but yes. Regarding yes, it's very hot in these buildings. Honestly, I think Cold Spring can get hotter than Hedge, and I think it's because of the window configuration there. But yes, we have our 3 oldest buildings, Nathaniel Morton, Hedge, and Cold Spring. We have purchased these large, substantial air conditioning units, which will help. They've been used for voting. You've seen them if you've voted out a Hedge. We've purchased some of those, and we'll be outfitting those as the season progresses.
Yeah,
Dr. Blaisdell can come speak to something else.
The gauging that was reported before was that those buildings can get as high as 90 degrees in warmer weather. So that's really concerning to me. I think this has to happen. But the last question I have is, what is the percentage of the special needs students for those 2 schools? Do we have any kind of numbers on that?
Yes, off the top of my head, no, but I just want to, they're approximately 16 to 18%, actually a little bit lower in those 2 schools because they don't have programs, but they're right around the state average. I also failed to mention that it was about $150,000 in ARPA. We received some ARPA funds from the town to support that project for the air conditioning, so I wanted to mention that as well.
Okay, great. Because if I remember, they were still doing like traveling specials where like you'd have to have like like their music, their art, and their band, like were on carts that would be wheeled from classroom to classroom. Is that still happening?
That is still happening. We have 12 classrooms at each school, and they currently operate as classrooms, so any specialist, with the exception of the library. But the library at Cold Spring is a multi-purpose specialist room. Hedge has had a hard time retaining specialists because the gym is also used for music. They've had other classes in there as well, but yes, and they're on carts.
Okay. Just, Mr. Moderator, Mr. Tavares, would it be possible that we could put on the agenda for sometime in maybe June or July where we could have Mr. Campbell come back and talk to us about the study that he's doing and also specifically about the long-term plans of the other buildings that we know are going to need consolidation or some type of rehab, to see what the updates are on that plan?
Sure, I'll speak with Dr. Campbell after we get through town meeting and see where he's at, where he might even have time to come in the future, and where he's at studies, and if it's smart to come in June or wait till August or October or whatever it might be.
Happy to do that as soon as opportunity presents itself.
I think my only added comment to this would be to kind of highlight one of the items that Dr. Campbell said when he talks about equity across the schools for all of our students to have equal opportunity. I think it actually probably dovetails a little bit into what my colleague, Mr. Costello, said. When you have a comfortable environment to learn in, be it in pre-K, kindergarten, elementary school, all the way up to through high school, that is conducive to learning, and that is helpful. You're not distracted by being too hot, being too cold. Our kids have enough to worry about throughout the day that the school building shouldn't be one of those. So I look forward to seeing the outcome of this, hopefully through this article if it passes. So,
thank you.
Thank you. Are there any further comments or questions within? Mr. Weber.
If and when we're wrapped up with these questions, I'd like to utilize the captive audience factor of our meeting to ask questions that we didn't have school committee reps with us last meeting.
Sure, regarding consolidation?
Correct.
Yes, and the best part about it is the person that presented on that is also in the room, so they could, I have no objection to that unless Dr. Campbell or any of you need to go anywhere, if you want somebody else to. It would be in regards to the articles. We had a couple of questions regarding the consolidation articles that are being put forward to town meeting. As far as facilities, or for example, I think there was a lot of other pieces, but before we move on to that, any further questions regarding Article 5, just so we're not jumping back and forth? No. Mr. Weber, would you like to ask a couple of questions? And Mr. Canty, be prepared on deck, I guess.
Thank you. Appreciate that, Mr. Chairman. Dr. Campbell, you've been here with us for 17 years. And so I have to assume that you were in an administrative role back in 2010 and 2012 when there were two other consolidation committees formed.
Correct. I wasn't on them, but yes, I'm aware of them. Yes.
So can you give us a comment and combine that, hopefully, so I won't have to keep asking questions, but hopefully you can give us a comment on why you feel that those consolidation committees did a lot of work, but never ended up with a recommendation to actually consolidate with the town. And I know that they had a consultant that was hired to give them advice. At the last meeting, I read into the record the opinion that consultant gave. If you could touch on the cost of that consultant. And the only reason I'm asking that question is because this is somewhat of these three articles at town meeting are being painted to us to believe that they are a harmless intent. All they're doing is taking language out of the charter and putting it where it's more properly formatted in a bylaw. But I'm thinking down the road where the appointed spokesman, Kevin Canty, Vice Chair of the Board of Selectmen, has already telegraphed to us that his intention, if these articles pass, is to go to the October town meeting and seek funding through capital requests to appropriate some funds to actually and physically get into a recommendation that we never reached before. So I'm asking, number one, what were the prior costs that we did? What are the future anticipated costs that Mr. Canty is going forward with in October? Who will bear those costs, school department or town? And I guess what we've been dying for, at least in Precinct 3, our committee is looking for a position statement from the school administration and/or school committee on where we're going and what the end result of these articles will be. And thank you, and
You're welcome.
sorry for...
No worries. I'm going to answer what I can answer, because some of it I can't answer. So yes, I've been here for 17 years. I was assistant superintendent for 12 of the past 17 years. I was not involved in the last two consolidations. I'm aware of them, and I'm aware that they took place. I was not actively involved in that, so I can't speak to the inner workings, how that was structured. I know it resulted in nothing in terms of a recommendation. That's my understanding. How much it costs, I don't know. I have seen a bill of $5,000 on the school side that I saw from one of those consolidation efforts, I think, to bring in someone to help consult the committee. I'm not aware of the cost to that, Mr. Weber. I'm only aware of 2 articles. You mentioned 3. I'm not sure I understand what the third one is, but I'll try to speak to Article 21 and 22. So as we've had this conversation in a little bit, and I don't want to speak for the school committee, but I would share the same concerns as I feel I speak for the school committee when last year through the Charter Review Committee, there were concerns on the school department side and the school committee side in terms of the governance of our facilities, because that was struck from the charter revisions. And there was some concerns about that. I think we do an excellent job of maintaining our facilities. I think our skilled craftsmen, our custodians, maintenance workers do an excellent job. We have a good reputation. Our buildings are very well maintained. So to not have ownership and superintendency over those facilities was of concern to me and was of concern of the school committee. And that was voiced last year. I also believe I speak correctly when I say that Ms. Badger, who was the chair then, also spoke out that felt that a bylaw should have come before the charter revision. She felt that by solidifying something, which I believe is at 22, the bylaw, 21 is the other way. So Article 21 is sort of addressing what Ms. Badger was concerned about and the school committee was concerned about losing that control over the facilities, as we explore things. And I think what I have said is that I would never suggest that we would consolidate anything specifically. But I do feel that I'm open, and I think the school committee is always open to looking at how we work most efficiently. Again, I can't speak to what was done in the past. I'm not suggesting it has to be done a certain way to bring in anyone. I feel comfortable being a part of that myself and having, I think, what I also think is important is to bring the people in to the conversation that are a part of that day-to-day work. Whatever we're looking at, whether it's facilities or anything that we do where there may be some coexistence in activity. And I don't think it's, this is my opinion, I don't think we're going to come across anything that would be cost savings. There may be some small cost savings, but I don't know. I haven't gone through that process myself. I'm not familiar with how it's been done in the past. I know how I may approach it in terms of identifying objectives and looking at what are we trying to do. If it's all about saving money, I don't think that's going to come to fruition. If we are looking to be more efficient and mindful of where we allocate things, and I've given the example of snow removal before, town and school both does snow removal. Is that something that we could look at doing differently? I don't know. But again, I think it's very early and premature to make any assumptions on anything. But I believe, and again, I speak for myself, and I believe I speak for the school committee, that the bylaw was something that was of concern to have that in place because of what happened last year with the potential changes to the charter. And I don't think the school department would be supportive of the charter revision without that bylaw in place. I hope I made clear sense there.
One follow-up?
Mr. Weber, I'll let
Thank
you
you.
follow up, and then I'm going to go to Ms. Perkins.
Today, the federal government announced the closure and the dismantling, starting the process of the dismantling of the Board of Education. I'm sure you guys have been anticipating a response one way or the other, but now it's in motion. And one of the things that I still am concerned about is how does that square with future consolidation attempts? Or, more importantly, we're now serving our school-age children breakfast and lunch based on federal and state grants. How will that impact, maybe I should have asked this under your budget, but how will that impact where we are if this goes through? Without a court decision, because I think it may end up...
Yeah, so again, that's, I'm very concerned about what's happening across a lot of departments, to be quite frank, particularly the Department of Education. Again, the preliminary information that I have regarding the financial assistance that we have now is that that's not being affected. That's as recent as last night. It's something I read. I'll believe it when I see it. So and we won't know until probably late June, July, or we could find out earlier. There could be something that comes while we're in this room that surprises me, but that would be a major concern. A major concern. That would devastate us. Welcome.
Jackie.
I was just writing it down so I get it right. I had a real concern about that request to consolidate power. The idea that any, is this working? There we go, sorry. The idea that the superintendent or the school committee loses any degree of power about what they need for funds and how those funds are spent is anathema to me. I'm a school teacher, and I have real concerns about the climate and attitude towards education in this moment. And so I think that even if you said yes, you feel conciliatory to the idea of losing the power that you have in terms of how you spend your money and or use your workforce. I still don't have a feeling of trust because we're not going to be here forever, and other people are going to step in. And so the structure to me is very important the way it is. And I'm wondering, do you think that, well, let me put it this way. We all need to work collaboratively, right, to be most efficient, and the mechanisms of our government are complex. I am not 100% knowledgeable about all of those in the way that you are. So I think what I want to know from you especially is, can the flexibility and the efficiency that is being sought in the consolidation of this power be done without having to change the bylaw or the charter?
I think before you answer, Dr. Campbell, is I'd like to hear your answer on that, but also since we have the vice chair of the select board after you speak, I think, Kevin, you may have some thoughts on that as well.
Yeah.
If not, that's also okay.
Yeah, so because I'm not certain, certainly open to having conversations and looking at things without any change I don't know what would need to change in order to, if we came to terms about something that we felt comfortable with. I'll give another example. If we were to take over transportation eventually, I don't think it would be in our best interest to have, mechanics on both sides. I think investing in DPW and having our buses, supported on the town side might be the best way. But again, it's so early to have, I don't know what I don't know yet.
Right.
Essentially. So I'm just saying, as the superintendent of schools, I'm open to having collaborative conversations to look at how we can be efficient and mindful of things as we move forward, but in terms of the
Before you do
bylaw.
that, can I
Yeah.
just follow up? So I understand the mechanism of town meeting every 6 months and having to wait before things can happen in terms of getting things done. But what I'm hearing is it might be premature to be making this decision, since we don't know.
Well, I don't know what we lose by having the bylaw in place. I think that's the concern, and again, I don't want to speak for the school committee, but I feel that I do. There was concern about changing the charter without having the bylaw in place. So the school committee wanted the bylaw in place to sort of solidify that the schools were in charge of facilities, which that bylaw states. We've had conversations about looking at how we may be more efficient in certain areas, and we're open to that, but I can't speak to that.
Thank you.
Any further.
And if Mr. Paisano, if at any point you would like to, as chair of the school committee, come up to the podium, I'm sure we would welcome that as well. We don't want to keep putting Dr. Campbell on the spot to speak for them. So I'll let you speak, Mr. Canty, and then if Mr. Paisano has anything, and then Jackie, if you have any follow-up, and then I'll have Ms. Pratt online.
So to answer your question, no. Without the ability to consolidate services, sustained collaboration on the level that we may need for something like the mechanics for the buses, because that would be a regular recurring thing, as opposed to, obviously, if there was an emergency and there was a catastrophic issue over there, we wouldn't look at the structure of our government and say, well, we'd love to help you while you're drowning, but we're not going to do that. But if every day they're drowning in something, we would need a structural change in order to correct that. And that's the type of things that we're looking at in terms of improving, as I said when I was before you last week, efficiency may be a benefit, but not cost, because the same work would still exist on both sides of the ledger. But if we are going to have a sustained effort to provide assistance one way or the other, we would need the ability to consolidate so that where that work is actually going and being directed would be accurately reflected in the budgets that you all approve, wherever that looks. Now, and as was said earlier and was said again today, any consolidation efforts would involve collaboration between town and schools. And at the time that consolidation was actually being implemented, would also involve negotiations with affected bargaining units, and then presentations to town meeting and to approve that. So it would go through the entire process and be vetted at that time. Putting the bylaw in place now, changing the charter now, where it takes 18 months to 2 years to take place, where every day, in my opinion, something new and horrific is happening on the federal level that has significant and sweeping impacts on this, the functioning of our government here as well. Because even when federal funding, something like the school lunches, which I think is paid for by the state. But when federal dollars in other areas go away from the state, it indirectly affects what the state can do in that regard as well. So there are concerns that what's happening on the federal level will, to use a term of old, trickle down to us in ways that are unforeseen and unfortunate. And we think that in this climate, where so many of these decisions are outside of our hands, that having that flexibility to move things around as needed to provide, as I said last time, still provide that level of service to residents, to students, and to the community is necessary. And this gives us the flexibility to do that in a sustained way. And again, in a way that makes sense, that is studied, vetted, and goes through the entire process. It's not going to be done willy-nilly. It's possible nothing will be done at all. But we want to have that flexibility to meet the challenges of the uncertain times that we find ourselves in.
Ms. Perkins, do you have anything that you want? I see you, if you want to keep mulling that over, I can.
Yes and no. I think I want to be convinced. I feel like, and I think a lot of other people do too.
Sure.
Because when I've been in a town when there has been a pretty extreme austerity. And,
Right.
what decisions are made by whom? Oh, sorry. It's kind of a heated issue for me.
Sure.
What decisions are made who makes the decisions in the end when the power is consolidated is a real concern for me, because I think that the schools and the kids, that's like young people, old people, we don't touch them.
Right.
And I have concerns about making this change for that reason. Because even at the town meeting level, there are going to be people of interest who have interests that are not necessarily going to be those. But the school committee and the superintendent always have that interest. It
Right.
never goes away.
Well, you could,
And
in
so-
theory, someone could run for school committee that wants to dismantle. I mean, we've seen that in other
That's true.
communities as well,
That's
right?
true.
You could have a member of somebody run for the select board that doesn't believe in town government and try to dismantle that. So, all of those entities would be involved in those decisions. But the thing is, the most important thing is that this is a change that, in order to take effect, has an 18-month to 2-year lead time.
I realize this.
And so that's why it's important to give us the opportunity to make a change later when a change may be necessary by acting now, solidifying the status quo and just nesting it in a different area right now, no changes right now, but empowering us to later make a pivot if and when a pivot is necessary. Because if in 18 months to 2 years we are in a situation where we are faced with having to make a difficult decision in one or more areas that could have been avoided had we made this change now, it will be too late to go back and do that. But if we do this now and we prepare ourselves for having that flexibility then we can seize upon the opportunity at that time. So we do not know what the future holds, but school committee, school administration, select board, town administration, and town meeting will all be involved throughout the entire process of any change that is made, as well as any affected bargaining units. But there's no way, there's not going to be a capital request for a DeLorean with a flux capacitor. So the only way that we're going to be able to make this change then is if we make this change now.
Okay, I'll let you continue on. I do need
No, I would
to
really
allow
like
other
to-
members and to speak. Mr. Paisano, did you want to add anything to that before I move on to Ms. Pratt?
Yeah, because I don't know that Mr. Canty and I are necessarily aligned. I will say, Dr. Campbell speaking on behalf of the school committee, we are very well aligned, so I have no issue with him speaking for us. So, a couple of gaps I see. One, this is being framed as as consolidation articles or consolidation discussion. The school committee does not view this at all related to consolidation. We were if you go back 9 months, we were perfectly happy with the way things are. When an article is raised to remove our responsibilities from the charter and basically leave a vacuum, we were extremely concerned. So we were vehemently opposed to the article that was presented at fall town meeting. Our compromise was, if you want to do that, it needs to be accompanied by a corresponding bylaw which enshrines those same responsibilities in a bylaw, which I will agree makes things more flexible in the future because it's a lot easier to change the bylaw than it is to change the articles. But it was purely to say, hey, we feel very strongly about the responsibilities of the school committee and the school administration, and we want to make sure that's codified somewhere. So we're not opposed to these articles as long as they're in tandem. So our recommendation was they either are both no or both yes. Our worst nightmare would be, people voting down, taking it out of the charter and then not putting it in bylaw. But again, this was a compromise. If we go back a year, we were perfectly happy with things just being in the charter. So folks who certainly have ulterior motives to take it out of the charter is certainly what got us here. But we're not, fundamentally opposed to it being in, to it moving from the charter to the bylaw. We're also open to, discussions. I don't, Mr. Gandy painted this as having to make future decisions. I'm not aware of any decisions the school committee is considering with regards to consolidation. We're open to discussions. I think I'd be a poor public servant if I didn't have an open mind and willing to hear different concepts and ideas, but the school committee, and I think I speak for the vast majority of us, are not pro-consolidation. But that said, we're always willing to, discuss, if there's ways, especially in the budget climate we're in, if there's ways to, use the dollars we have more efficiently, I'm open to that discussion, but obviously, any changes in the way the schools are governed would have to be voted on by the school committee themselves in addition to whatever, is decided at fall town meeting. In addition, Mass General Law makes very clear what some of the responsibilities of the school committee are. So regardless of what's in the charter or in the bylaws, there was talk of maybe we just don't have it at all because, Mass General Law obviously governs the responsibilities of the school department. But yeah, I mean, so to me, this isn't, depending who you talk to, it opens up the door to consolidation. But we don't, like I said, we were supportive of this because we viewed it as long as they're together, just on both or no on both, it to us leaves us where we are now. I don't think it makes any change, But I'm happy to answer any questions.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Paisano.
That was helpful, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Paisano. I'm going to go with Chris Pratt, who's been waiting a moment here. Ms. Pratt.
So thank you very much for those explanations. I can tell you that I like the fact that any future consolidation effort would require the approval of town meeting, so I was happy to hear that. What I was concerned about is I asked the question about how it would be reflected in a budget. There was some future consolidation activity of HR, IT, whatever. Exactly how would that be presented in budgets? And I believe Vice Chair Kevin Canty indicated that, well, whatever department assumed the overall responsibility, it would be reflected in their budget. Today, we have a clear delineation between town budget and expenses and school budget expenses. And I'm a bit disconcerted that in the future, that would all become a bit murky. So, I think that's something that, the school does a remarkable job of capturing expenses, showing exactly where the costs are increasing, et cetera. The town does an equitable job of the same thing. However, to combine those expenses, like facilities, for example, or HR or IT, I would in the future still want to see them separated. And so I'm a bit, I have to say that I'm not necessarily in favor of these articles if the end result's going to be that any future consolidation expenses would be they would be consolidated as well under one department. That's not what I would like to see going forward. So I don't know if Mr. Canty, you want to reflect further on that, but that is a concern for me.
Mr. Canty.
Sure. So, I mean, right now, not all of the school's expenses are nested in the school side of the budget. There are member benefits that are on the town side presently, a significant amount of money on that, because that just makes sense to administer it in that way, because all the member benefits, it's all a benefits package, so it's nested in a particular area. There's some other smaller items that are in the same way. But if you did have, again, there are no specific plans for consolidation at this point. So we're talking in hypotheticals because we want to study it and look at it, and we don't think 15 to 13-year-old study is reflective of current on-the-ground thinking. So that's why we think this is worth reviewing at this time, despite it having been reviewed in the distant past. But if IT, for example, were consolidated, say, entirely on the town side, it would be to provide IT services throughout the community to all municipal needs, town and schools, and you would see what that budget entails, and you would be able to see, if you looked at it and it were reported that way, you could divide it out by, this is what's being provided to these types of building, this is what's being provided to Chromebooks, which are going obviously to school children. This is what's being provided to PAC TV services, which would cover the internet and the streaming services that we have here, things of that nature. So you could still see how that money is being spent and divided. It would depend on what's being consolidated, where it's being consolidated, how that's being practiced. But you would still be able to see, with the same level of specificity that you do now, practically. But I did want to highlight that currently there are a significant amount of school expenses that are still on the town side. And that has always been the case and will always probably be the case.
Ms. Pratt, any follow-up?
No, I think that he's elaborated a bit more than our last meeting, so thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Any further discussion within the room? Mr. Weber?
I'm still waiting for Mr. Canty to get into his DeLorean and dial up the flux capacitor to September as we prepare for the October town meeting, and tell us what the number is that you will be looking for as you get into this study, if it passes town meeting in the next couple of weeks.
Sure. So we would be looking to see what the cost of that would be if and when this is successful, but I do not have a number at this point. But it would go through the same capital process that, say, a traffic study would go through, and we would solicit what that would look like at that time.
My last comment is, each time we have this discussion, and I'm encouraged by the exchanges, but we uncover another layer of the onion. We originally started talking about the potential consolidation of human resources, IT, snow plowing, and tonight we hear that we may want to consolidate the maintenance of 77 school buses into the DPW. That would be a huge downward spiral to the functions of the mechanics in the DPW without an enormous expansion. I believe the company that currently provides service to our 77 buses has 6 mechanics in Plymouth, but they also have many other mechanics in neighboring towns that they can pull from. But we have 3 mechanics here in the town of Plymouth that maintain over 250-something vehicles. So this is what I'm afraid of about, this is not just an innocent article to take something out of the charter and put it in a bylaw. This thing is gaining legs every time we talk about it.
Dr. Campbell, I'm going to let you.
Just want to address the mechanic comment. That was a hypothetical that I threw out, and I agree with you. It certainly, maybe I shouldn't have thrown out a hypothetical, but hypothetically, if we were to take over those, we would need a substantial amount of mechanics to do that. No question, no question. I used that as an example, just suggesting that rather than having the addition of all of those mechanics on the school side, to have them working under the DPW because of all the other large vehicles that they may be maintaining as well. So it's nothing to do with, yeah. No, but I just wanted to be clear on that. It wasn't, I'm not suggesting that, yes.
I think the other interesting thing about this debate is that it's spawning a lot of, that I've observed is, and listened to out in the general population, is that it's spawning a lot of, this is where we could consolidate. Nobody knows. I think my concerning piece to these articles is, nobody knows where consolidation could be, is because the conversations aren't happening. I've listened to Dr. Campbell, I've listened to the school committee, both say, we are more than open to having these conversations. Why aren't we having those conversations? Why do we need a bylaw to have those conversations? I understand you want to push a timetable, but you could have those conversations over the next 3 months and present something in October.
So we've been having those conversations for the past 6 months in various forms. We've talked about.
So then we do have some ideas of where we're going to consolidate?
No.
Because then that would address
No.
Mr. Weber's concerns.
No. We have talked about things, initiatives to collaborate and work together in a more constructive way going forward for the past 6 or more months. Some of that has involved the aspect of taking on transportation through the schools by buying a fleet of buses, because we are aware that a significant driver of the school's budget is their transportation cost that are beholden to the profit motives of a private entity. That is, we are seeing in other communities increases year on year of, I think it's up to like 30% in some neighboring communities, because they're basically making up the money they lost during COVID. We had a longer term contract, so it might make more economic sense for us to buy buses rather than have them run through there.
And that
But
contract is almost ready to be
we
negotiated?
have about 2 years
Yeah.
left, which lines up with this time frame. And as was discussed tonight, there is if we did have that fleet of buses, we might need additional personnel in order to maintain them. And as Dr. Campbell said, it might make more sense to have that happen on the DPW side, because what you're seeing on the school side over the last couple of years is that as their budget is tightening over there, because they have a lot of unfunded mandates that drive their budget, that they're having to focus more and more of their budget on providing core educational services to students. So, and we want that to be maintained. So there's no need per se that a mechanic needs to be paid by the schools when we could have them paid by the DPW department, because they already have mechanics, or have a structure for mechanics. And those mechanics, when they're not working on a bus, could work on something else too if they were at the DPW. So that's that efficiency that we're talking about. And that would prevent us from having to hire mechanics on the school side and potentially taking money away from providing core educational services over there. So that's an example of that. We are going to look at specifics in some of these other areas and any other areas that a consultant thinks is appropriate. That is going to take some time. But we are cognizant of the fact that while that study is taking place, it's only going to be fresh. That data is only going to be fresh for a certain period of time. So it makes sense to get our ducks in a row to be able to respond to the results of such a study in a timely manner while it's still fresh, rather than do study first, then change the charter, which takes 2 years, and then maybe your data isn't as fresh and the results aren't as fresh. So that's why this is happening in the order that it's happening and in the manner that it's happening.
Okay, well, I appreciate the answer. How many DPW mechanics do we have? Mr. Weber, do you know that off the top of your head?
I think you were rushing that to the...
I was, but everybody looked at you.
When we were in a perfect world, we at one time had 5. We now have 3. And we've had vacancies for 2 years, 3 years now, and we're at the point now where the town manager has utilized a new program called the vacancy factor for budgeting.
Right, correct.
So
Okay.
it's not the time the way you would take on 77 school
I understand.
buses.
Thank you for answering my question. I'm going to go within the room. I saw Mr. Brewster and then Ms. Pratt. I'm going to come to you next. Once, Ms. McCarthy, once we get through our committee members, because you are a town meeting member, I will allow you to come up and ask some questions, but I want to get through the committee first. So, Mr. Brewster.
I've heard some evil empire and, that they have ulterior motives. The question I would have is, what's their ulterior motives? To make things more efficient? I think we need to look at, hey, is this a good idea? Is this something that could make us more efficient, more economical, more anything, as opposed to everybody's talking about power and loss of power, that the school's losing power and the town's gaining power. I'm on the back end of this looking at, hey, could this help us in some way? Now, I've spoken to a school plumber who went to the the fire station and was told, hey, you can't be here because it's conflicting. It's just, I caution us at being in conflict and looking at ulterior motives and looking at, well, they're just a power grab, and if this is a good idea, why shouldn't we look into it? That's my 2 cents.
Ms. Pratt.
Kind of two-part question. One is, are there other municipalities that have done this, something similar? That's number one. And then my second question it's a deja vu from when I asked the last meeting, and then Chairman Tavares brought up again tonight is, can't we theoretically create what a consolidation of a particular department might look like, or activity might look like whether it's HR and IT. That's the same question I asked a week ago, and then Mr. Tavares followed up with the same request today. So if we're talking today, why can't we come up with, gee, this is what it might look like in the future should we agree to consolidate efforts surrounding HR? It would help us to understand an additional level of detail, which today is challenging for us to kind of foresee. So, two-part question: any municipalities doing this very same thing? And two, why can't we come up with what it would look like if we consolidated HR activities or IT? I don't care what we pick, but.
Sure. So
Mr. Canty.
there are municipalities that have consolidated in one direction or another. I don't have an exhaustive list for you, but I could look into that in advance of town meeting in anticipation that level of specificity may be brought up at that time. But there are other municipalities that have consolidated in one direction or another. In terms of what it would specifically look like if we were to consolidate HR, I'm not an HR professional, so I would be out of my depth to say specifically how HR would function if it were to be consolidated. That's part of the effort that you have a consultant is, hey guys, if you were to consolidate, this is what that would look like. This is what the efficiencies you would have versus your current model would be, and that's why you may consider doing that. A consultant may come in and say, well, you could consolidate in this way. It could have these efficiencies, but it also have these costs, so we don't recommend it. Or they could say, we think the efficiencies outweigh the growing pains of having to do that, and we do recommend it. But that would be entirely part of that process, so I don't think we could give you an answer as to what it would look like. We've talked about areas that we think may benefit from consolidation, which are not core educational services, and are things like potentially aspects of facilities.
Had a lot of people argue both sides, but it seems to me when it comes right down to it, all we're talking about is timing here. There's absolutely nothing else that changes.
Correct.
In essence, there's nothing else that changes. It takes the same approval process.
Right.
The same thing, but all it does is it means that the time to do that could be shortened if we do it by bylaw rather than charter.
Correct.
Am I correct on that?
You are 100% correct in that. Nothing would change after October were this everything would function exactly the same as it does right now. Just in the future, if consolidation was mutually agreeable, then it could be pursued in a quicker time frame. That is the only thing that would change.
Mr. Begley?
Thanks. Actually, this is kind of following up on Ms. Pratt's question, because the way I understood her question was more, Kevin, you went into explaining like the consultant process, but I think her question was, why can't we do that now? She wasn't asking you for your opinion on HR moves now. She was saying what you then went into explaining, like why can't we do what you explained now without these changes?
Sure, so I answered that part earlier, but I can answer it again. So if we were to do the study now, and we'd have the results now, part of our concern is that the results of that study, if we waited for 18 months to 2 years for consolidation to be possible, because that's the time frame to effectuate a charter change, that we would be no longer acting on fresh, relevant data, potentially, depending on what the nature of those changes would look like, and that's why we are doing it in the order that we're doing it, to set it up so that we can act upon a study shortly after we receive the results of that study, if and when we choose to act on the results of that study. That's all.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Canty. I'm going to go with Mr. Costello, and then I'm going to go with Ms. McCarthy. We're diving into articles that are kind of, while it's good that we're getting a lot of this, but we are going into questions that are off the agenda, but also very relevant for town meeting floor. So go ahead, Mr. Costello.
This is just quick. My recollection from being on the Charter Review Commission, and this is only a small part of it, but it's a very substantial part, is even if you had the best conversations tomorrow and someone came up with a brainstorm and came up with a great idea to consolidate, the way it's written in the Charter, you might be prohibited from even doing it. So I think the move is to get the wording out of the Charter and put it in a more flexible vehicle, a bylaw. That's really what we're hoping to do. Then you can start discussing different departments, mechanics, buses, all that stuff can come later. But you could come up with the best idea tonight on your way home, and you can't do it presently the way the Charter is written. So we're spinning our wheels. We spun our wheels in 2010, 2003, whatever the dates were, because when you get to the end and somebody pulls up the Charter language, game over. You can't do it. Or somebody could fight it or hold you back. So that's why we have to do this, just clear out that same wording, put it in a vehicle that is easier to change, more timely, and it gives us options. Right now, quite honestly, we have 0 options. There's no sense even really getting into a big discussion on this.
That's correct.
Thank you.
Mrs. McCarthy, I'd like to allow you some time. Mrs. McCarthy, town meeting member from Precinct 18.
Yes, Precinct 18, Vice Chair. Actually, Alan, you answered or brought up some of the same thoughts and questions I had, as well as Chris Pratt. But in going into town meeting, I just hope it would, my understanding is that the bylaw enables us to even consider acting after study. And in light of everything going on, which those concerns have been brought up tonight, in terms of education funding for town and school sides budgets from the federal government on down, I think this is timely that we do everything we can to learn what we could do in a shorter time frame than putting it in the Charter. So tonight's conversation, to me, has been more clarifying, and I would implore at town meeting to make it simple and kind of just say it like that, rather than go into the weeds, and then people who haven't followed the issues, and I've watched the presentations a few times, and I'm pretty, well, I'm not stupid and I'm not naive, but it's like, sometimes it's really hard to understand. So if they haven't watched anything, they're not watching tonight, then they haven't read their books, and they haven't gotten into it, I think making it as easy as possible at town meeting to make this is a simpler way to have a conversation down the road, and it could save it could help it, I don't even like to use the word efficiency, but it could make our government here more efficient and also provide just better services, and we need to do everything we can to save Plymouth. And that's my goal, because everything you read, what we can do locally is so important. And so going to town meeting, I just would implore that the presentation be very simple, bullet point. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. McCarthy. And it's also on all of our precinct chairs to relay information we hear here during our caucuses, as I'm sure you all do. So I'm going to go with Mrs. Adelman, and then I'd like to kind of move on from Articles 21, 22, and 23 from last week's agenda.
Thank you, Chairman. I just want to reiterate, I said the same thing at our last meeting, but I think the charter is sacred. To change the charter for a bylaw, it takes away the permanency and the significance. We're weakening the charter. And I keep hearing the flexibility and it gives the power. Who are we giving power to? The school human resources are so different from the town. And I heard this from the assistant superintendent who is in charge of human resources. So I am dead set against this bylaw. If something is that important, you can wait the 18 months to change the charter. And that's it. Thank you.
All right, thank you. I'm going to actually move along. Thank you, Dr. Campbell and et al. For coming in and actually doing your extracurricular duties today with the other articles. But thank you very much for coming in, and thank you, Mr. Canty, for speaking to Articles 21 through 23, right? If I can remember them correctly. I appreciate it. I'm sure we'll see you at caucuses, and we'll see you at town meeting in April. Have a great evening. Okay, moving along, we're going to go to the Community Preservation Act, Articles 16 through 18. The chair, it's hard for me not to say Chief Bradley, but I suppose I can still refer to you as that. Mr. Bradley, if you'd like to come forward. Thank you for hanging in there for the last 2 hours. I appreciate it.
All right, thank you. My name is Ed Bradley. I'm the chairman of the Community Preservation Committee. And each year by legislation, the CPC must set up their accounts and either spend or set aside 10% in each of the three categories. One is housing, the other is open space recreation, and the third is historic preservation. And also, along with that, we have to set up our administrative account, which by legislation, we're allowed to have 5%. In the town of Plymouth, we only set aside 4%. And we also set aside money for our debt service for that year. So that's what these articles are going to be that I'm going to present to you tonight. The first one is Article 16. And that's asking to pay down Plymouth Area Coalition for the Homeless $398,814 from fiscal 26 CPA annual funds. And this will meet their requirement for the 10% for housing. So we're going to buy that down, and that'll be less money that will be on the sheets for borrowing. Article 17 will be to pay down Stevens Field. And in that case, we're going to be paying down a total of $1,692,000. That's the amount needed to close out the project and complete it. And that money will come from fiscal 26 CPA annual revenues, and this will satisfy the 10%. It's actually more than that, but it will satisfy the 10% towards open space and recreation. Article 18 is the article for our budget. It includes setting aside $398,814 for historic resource reserve. That's the 10% requirement. That's for our historic preservation. We're also going to set up our operating budget at 4%, which is $159,526. And on top of that, we'll be setting aside $297,375 for the annual debt service, And that's going to be, we're going to be borrowing $5,947,500 for various projects, and that's estimated at a 5% interest rate. And if, of all of you have had enough experience with Lynn Barrett to know that if she's estimating at 5%, it'll come in less than that, and we'll have some money left over at the end of the year, as always. The crystal ball she has is unbelievable. And then the remaining money will be held in reserve to be either pay debts on either of those three categories, or if something comes up at fall town meeting that looks to be like a worthy project. We are not bringing any new projects to spring town meeting.
Thank you very much. I did notice that. And I was anxiously awaiting the special as well, when to get that book to make sure that nothing got snuck in there
No,
instead.
nothing gets stuck in there.
But thank you very much. I know that there's been a lot of work over the last year or two within the CPC and looking at tightening the belt straps and seeing where we're meeting the requirements, but we're not overburdening that fund. Are there any questions? I hope there are after you've sat here for 2 hours. So, Mr. O'Brien.
Thank you. Could you please repeat the amount on Article 17, please?
17 is, excuse me, 17 will be for Stevens Field, and that will be $1,692,000. And that will close out that project. It's a beautiful place.
Thank you.
Any further questions, either online or within the room? Well, job well done. Please pass along a job well done to your committee as well. Thank you for toughing it out this evening. And Lynn, thank you for also, I see you sitting out there as well. So thank you very much, and thank you for your work on these articles.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for coming in. Okay, at this point, we are moving on to public comment. Not too bad, only about 20 minutes off pace. So not seeing anyone in the room. Are there any members online? I do see a member online. Ginny Davis, please go right ahead, unmute yourself.
Yeah, I just had a quick question, and they've just left, but when I looked at Article 16, this is CPC, it does have the amount for the reduction for Coalition for the Homeless, I believe, but the reduce for Stevens Field wasn't mentioned. And I know someone asked, but I don't understand, always in the past, the amounts of money were always in the article. I mean, like, and that's not even reduce the borrowing. That's not even on the page where they're talking about their budget. And why is that? Just curious. I know someone just asked the amount. I didn't write it down. I couldn't find a pen.
So
we shouldn't have to ask. It should be there.
Ms. Davis, I think, so I still have Mr. Bradley in the room, but I think that if you look at the budget, you would see the number, and then within the article, it's meeting the borrowing authorization, bringing the project to complete, so it would be the remainder of the balance. But Mr. Bradley, if you want to speak to as to why the number's not actually shown within the article, that was how I got to the math of it, but if you'd like to.
But we shouldn't have to do that math. It's always been there. I'm just saying.
Yeah, sometimes we all have to do a little more homework than we'd like to do.
Well, no, it was always there. I don't think we should have to do the homework. You know, there's a lot of stuff to keep track of anyway. Thanks.
When the books are put together and early on, we don't have all those exact numbers. We know we have to, by legislation, set aside 10%. As a matter of fact, the number that we're using for that particular one, but for the 10% of the $398,814, that 10%, that's right now, I guess, based on last year's. That number may increase as the surcharge, or the properties in town, the more of them, there's more surcharge, and it could actually hit 4 million, in which case each of these categories would be changed to 400,000. This is the information we have currently at the time, and I think that's why the legislation talks in percentages, and then we have to turn that into dollars.
I think more what Ms. Davis was getting at was that within the actual wording of Article 17, which is the reduction of the Stevens Field down to project complete, It doesn't actually have the funding number, whereas like you see in Article 16, it gives you the actual dollar amount, if I remember correctly.
And that particular dollar amount number, the finance director was just able to come up with within the last 3 weeks to narrow everything down and close it out and finish it off.
So it
And
was-
if we removed it from borrowing, how much less we would be paying on the interest.
Right.
So that could be then brought over to.
Right, and that's dependent upon
So
when
at
it gets
town
paid.
meeting, will we have those figures? Will they be put on up in front of us so we can see them?
I'm not sure how you're planning on presenting,
I mean, I
Mr.
want,
Brett.
I think we
Ms.
want to
Davis,
know.
please hold on one
Yeah.
moment.
Okay.
It's hard to hear in the room when we're kind of talking over each other. I'm not sure how you're planning on presenting. Are you presenting these articles with budget numbers before town meeting, with the actual number up in front of us?
Yes, we will. Definitely
Okay.
the Stevens Field one, because that's a known number. The other $398,000 number is right now a guess. We will present that number, but that number could change later on when the total taxes are brought in and that number is increased.
Understood. So that could change right up until the morning of, if you will. So,
It will probably change after the fact,
After
because
the
I don't
fact.
think that information will be from the state to the town before town meeting at all.
Sure. Ms. Davis, I'll allow you one more, and then I know
Yeah.
you have some
So
caucuses coming
even
up for
though it's
Precinct
an
4.
approximate number, it would be great to have that approximate number with the wording, this could change. Because it's just nice to have figures in front of us when we are in town meeting. At home, it's different. We have time to look at things, but things go really fast there. And I don't think I'm the only person that feels this way.
Sure. I just wanted to get this clarification
That's all,
out
but
there
thank
because
you.
you are a
Thanks.
town meeting member,
Excellent.
but I am in public comment, so I try not to bring too many people back into public comment. So I think we're going to move on to the next item, unless you had a point of order or something, Mr. Costello? I saw your hand up, I'm sorry.
No, I'm fine. I was going to ask you a question only because the chief came back to the podium, but no, I'll get him at another time. Thank you.
Okay. All right, moving on. Are there any other members of the public with comment this evening? Not seeing any. Is there any old business? No one bringing forth any old business? Any new business before the COPC? Not seeing that. Sorry, Mr. Weber, go right ahead.
Thank you. Under new business, would it be worth consideration for you, Mr. Chair, to schedule something in the future to talk about how in the last, I'm glad Mr. Bradley's hanging out. I was trying to give him some equity because he sat for 2 hours. He only spoke for 10 minutes. So would it be an agenda item to discuss how the community has all of a sudden gone from a 6% SHI inventory on the Community Preservation Committee to 9.6, where we're at the point now where we're teetering on safe harbor and for 1 year and possibly for 2 years, where we can control the growth in the town of Plymouth. And unless Mr. Bradley wanted to give a public comment, but it's up to you. I'm doing this through the chair.
I think that I agree with you in that topic, but I'd like to also add in bringing in the town manager at the same time for that topic. And I will put out, I kind of know the next, 3, well, we know the rest of the dates, right? I'll send that out to them. Obviously, we're at this point, it'll either be April 17th or May or possibly even June. But I think it's an important topic. It's something that I've definitely thought about, but I think that we need to have not just CPC, but also the town manager, because I think, and possibly the planning and development director as well, because I think the oversight of it kind of falls under the three of that purview, if you're in agreement with me. Yeah, and I welcome the suggestion for agenda items, as I always say to everybody. So, so that being said, is there any other further new business other than I will see you all at town meeting? We do have our preview nights. I went over all those dates last week, so I'm not going to go over them again. Is there any further new business? Not seeing any.
Motion to
adjourn-
close.
Motion to
Seconded.
adjourn by
Seconded.
Mr. Brewster, seconded by Pompey Delafield. Thank you all, and we'll see you at town meeting.